Is this the dagger?
And what's up, guys? After a long time, the NBA season is finally back. Welcome to another episode of the On the Ball Show here on the TWSN YouTube. I'm your host, Pranav Sriraman, joined by my co-hosts, Thomas Stapleton, Will Laughlin, and Christian DeBlock. Guys, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Can't wait to watch some NBA basketball. Fortunately, the Thunder game won't happen, but that's fine. We can watch all the other games. So.
Yeah, no, it was a great night of hoop last night. You know, excited to get the NBA back, of course, and hopefully, my Wizards get the dub tonight. We'll see.
Yeah, we had some good games yesterday. The Lakers-Clippers game obviously was much closer than the Nets-Warriors game, but Pacers-Knicks tonight, maybe Knicks will surprise me, but we'll see what happens.
Hey, man, Obi Toppin can be special. I feel like he could be special on the offensive end.
Definitely.
But moving on, we're going to get right into the show, guys. And this is our last show before Christmas. So we want to wish you guys all Merry Christmas. Hope you guys enjoy your Christmas hoop special that entire day. Man, we're going to get into that later on. But let's start off with the Rockets versus Thunder and just the whole James Harden spectrum that keeps evolving. So as we all know, the Rockets-Thunder game has been postponed tonight due to the Rockets having multiple positive COVID-19 tests. James Harden was unavailable for this game, even if it was resumed, because of COVID-19 policy violations. So I want to know this. How highly do you think of the Rockets at this current situation? Do you think James Harden is making the right decisions in terms of trying to convince the Rockets to just trade him ASAP, or do you think that he's going about this a wrong way by violating all the restrictions? Thomas, I'm going to start with you.
I mean, I think we can all agree he's definitely not going about this the right way. I mean, going to strip clubs, no mask, it's a disaster. And I feel like the longer the Rockets keep him on their roster, he just keeps losing trade value. It just feels like every day there's a new story, there's a new headline with James Harden, and it just feels like, his trade value, he's losing more and more every day. The Rockets, it's just a disaster. They didn't even have 8 guys for tonight. They had basically all of their good players out with COVID contact tracing or whatever it was. It's a disaster in Houston. It is. It's not we have a problem in Houston. We have multiple problems, and I don't even this. Think about Steven Silas. This must be a nightmare scenario for him. A nightmare scenario. I have no idea what this team does. Yes, I say move on from Harden. At this point, just look for the best package available and get rid of him as quickly as you can and just play out this season. Because what's going on? What is going on in Houston? They are handling this terribly. The James Harden situation is it's a nightmare. Everything's a nightmare. So just trade Harden away, and I really don't know. It's a disaster.
Before I let Christian chime in, so you said one thing. I agree with you that he's going about this the wrong way. You can't, listen, I get that you want to be traded and make other statements that show that, but you can't put other people at risk by violating COVID-19 policy. That's just something you can't do. And Harden knows better. He's a veteran. He knows better. But in terms of him losing trade value, I don't think he really loses trade value because it's James Harden. James Harden is worth that much on the trade market, and I think any team, any contender would still give up all the chips for him unless you're the Philadelphia 76ers and are stupidly waiting for Ben Simmons or Tyler Hero to become superstars that they're never going to be. Unless you're both of those teams, you want James Harden. Why wouldn't you want James Harden on your team? He makes your team better. Contrary to public opinion, he makes your team better. It's just that simple. So I don't think he really loses that much trade value. I think people see that he clearly wants out, and if he wasn't in Houston, he wouldn't be causing this much problem.
Here's my question though. If yes, James Harden makes his team better, undeniably. Any team that gets him is, in my eyes, instantly a championship contender, unless he gets traded to like the Pistons or something.
Or the Thunder.
Yeah, or the Thunder, unfortunately. But why haven't, if his trade value is still, where it's at, why hasn't the team traded for him yet? Why isn't the team willing to give up assets?
Because they probably haven't formed up a good enough package. Obviously, I don't know. I mean,
right.
I'm not in those front offices. Maybe I know the 76ers, for one, are higher on Ben Simmons than all of us are, and they want to maintain to his future value. I don't know how much stake that actually holds, but they want to see what Ben Simmons even has in the future. Maybe he could develop a jump shot. I never see it happening, but maybe they're holding out hope. Time will tell. In terms of other teams, maybe they just haven't made an offer that's blown the Rockets away. But yeah, I don't really know the answer. Just the fact that I'm not in those front offices, I don't know those thought processes.
Right.
So I definitely agree with a lot of what Thomas said. I wasn't really high on the Rockets going into the season with Harden, just because everything with the situation just doesn't look good. They flipped John Wall for Russell Westbrook with the pick involved. Didn't really love that either. It just seems to me like that, and he argued today, I think he put something on Instagram that he was explaining that he was at somebody's birthday thing or celebration. It doesn't matter, because honestly, I think the reason is he violated guidelines according to the NBA rules. So it wouldn't have mattered what the reasoning was for him going to Vegas. I just don't see this team being very good. It's interesting because I don't think it's a guarantee that even with Harden, just because he doesn't seem very motivated at the moment, seems unhappy, he's a distraction. I don't know if it's a guarantee they even make the playoffs. The supporting cast is kind of in a fluctuation. You look at Christian Wood, I think, is a nice player, but John Wall, we don't know what we're going to get from him. We don't know what DeMarcus Cousins is going to bring off a couple of major injuries. It's just an interesting situation, but I think they do need to get rid of him at some point, because it seems like, because I know there was, I think Kenny Smith on TNT last night was arguing there's a difference between unhappy, where you could possibly win games, but being a distraction and losing games. And I think it might get to that point where they start losing games and it's time for them to trade him. And teams like the Miami Heat just dropped out of interest in trading for him because they don't have the guys they want to give up. So I don't know who trades for him. You can talk about maybe the Nets, but they looked pretty good last night with what they have at the moment. You have the Sixers, who we've yet to see. They'll play tonight. But overall, I just don't like the situation. Harden's kind of just making this a mess, and it's a matter of time before he gets traded, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, to address what Harden's doing is good. I mean, obviously, it's not from you. Just like in theory, him wanting out, it makes sense. But the way he's going about it is absolutely all wrong, especially in the times that we're in right now. I mean, the way you just respectfully ask your general manager and your front office to be traded. That's all you have to do. You don't have to make a big show and do all this other stuff. I'm not going to, try and decipher whether James Harden was at a strip club or a party. I don't really care. The point is, he didn't even have a mask on. And frankly, I don't really care if it's your sister or whatever, someone you love's big event. It's just not a good idea to be there when you're an NBA basketball player. And you can just celebrate with whoever it is, just on the side. So it's just not a good idea for him to be there, given the fact that he is a superstar level basketball player. And clearly it's had an impact because, he was going to miss the game, and several other players for the Rockets as well. But yeah, when it comes to the whole situation for the Rockets, I mean, I've said it for quite some time that I've thought that the Rockets, they're not going to be a playoff team. And I don't necessarily think that they're going to be a bad NBA team. And if they were in the East, they probably would make the playoffs as like a lower seed, but they're in the West, and the West is absolutely stacked. I mean, there's like 6-7 teams that are like, I think, guaranteed playoff teams at this point. And there's a few other fringe playoff teams with upside, like the Pelicans and the Grizzlies, who are still going to be relevant teams. And that they
interrupt real quick, in my top 10 rankings, I think I had 7 Western Conference teams.
Right. I mean,
so heavily.
Right, exactly. I had like 6 or 7 Western Conference teams as well. Probably should have taken out the Warriors, but whatever. But I won't overreact to yesterday. But back to the topic at hand. For Houston, I'm just not confident at all in their ability to really do much this season. I think Harden. The reason teams aren't really trading for Harden now is just because all the teams, let's see, the Bucks, the Heat, the Sixers, and the Nets, 3 of those 4 teams already have, like new pieces. So I think they kind of want to just see what they have and see if they actually need a piece like James Harden. I think the Sixers could use him more than really any other team. I don't think the Nets need Harden at all. I mean, that team was scary, and bringing in Harden, sure, it could elevate you, but it's just like, why would you even take the chance? Like, your team is looking so good right now, and the offense was just amazing to watch last night. I know it's just one game, but I expect them to be just that good throughout this entire season, and they're a championship contender, so I don't think you risk messing any of that up and like screwing up your depth. So I don't think the Nets need them. The Bucks, obviously they want to see what they have with Drew Holiday, and they don't really have a great package.
Who are they going to trade?
Yeah, like Chris Middleton. I don't know. They were rumored to be interested, but they don't really have a package, quite frankly. And they traded all their first-round picks for Drew Holiday. So the Sixers makes the most sense, but apparently the Rockets are trying to get like a bunch of other first-round picks and Ben Simmons. So they just may not even come to a deal. So honestly, I think the Miami Heat might be the most realistic destination just in terms of the assets that are there. And the fact that the Heat, we'll see, they could possibly take a step back. I mean, they're not really, I don't think they're going to be that great of a regular season team anyways, just because they're not really built for the regular season. But I could see them pulling the trigger on a Harden deal if Tyler Hero doesn't improve that much. But overall, James Harden is probably going to be gone by the deadline. And even if he wasn't, I don't expect Houston to be all that great this year.
And another thing, here's why I don't see Harden's trade value really declining. A couple years ago, we saw a star player whose trade value declined, and the other team that ended up trading him away, they look really stupid right now. And that's Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard held out almost the entire year after his quad injury, and he wanted to get out of San Antonio. It was that simple. And they traded him for DeMar DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl, and a first. And that just looks like a terrible deal looking back on it, as the Raptors won a championship and the Spurs are sitting in mediocrity, having low lottery picks and not really doing much. So that deal didn't really work out. And I think the Houston Rockets know themselves that they can get a massive haul for James Harden, especially if a championship contender wants him. But like you guys said, Kawhi held out the proper way. He just didn't play. He just sat out, and he still got paid during doing that. So if Harden could do that, I would recommend doing that instead of, breaking COVID-19 policies. That's pretty much my entire take on that. Thomas, you look like a bet.
You know what team should trade for James Harden? The Wizards. Give up Bradley Beal, pair James Harden and Russell Westbrook back up.
We've seen that before.
It happen. I'm kidding.
I think I'm okay with no, I don't want to just go to the second round and get swept.
Bradley Beal and Denny for Harden.
I'll pass.
But guys, we're going to move on. We had 2 games that we saw last night: the Brooklyn Nets, Golden State Warriors, and the Clippers versus Lakers. We'll start off with the first game out of that matchup, the Nets and the Warriors. I'm going to start with Will on this one. What was your big takeaway from the Nets versus Warriors game? Will Steph have too much of a burden that he just may not be able to get over this season? And do you think Brooklyn is automatically coming out of the Eastern Conference?
So starting with the Nets, I think the Nets, I was not really expecting them to look this good. I mean, I was expecting them to win, and there was, with how the Warriors played, it's definitely realistic that they would have blown them out. But, I mean, that game was over after the first quarter. And Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant just didn't seem like they were missing a shot. And I was like, all right, this is just a wrap after.
They played Steph the entire first quarter, and it was just to keep it within 15.
Exactly. It was ridiculous. So the Nets are going to be just fine. I'm not going to say it's automatic, but they are easily, I think, the favorite out of the East. I mean, they're apparently, I saw the stat on Twitter, they're the only team, or they're like one of the only teams, if not maybe the only team in NBA history to like play all 15 guys on their roster in a single game. Like, that's how bad that game was for how good it was for the Brooklyn Nets. And they played literally all their guys. So Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, I mean, they looked absolutely phenomenal. The fit looked absolutely great. They didn't really get in each other's way. And they did what they do in isolation ball, and that didn't really hurt the entire team at all. Like, they were still moving the ball great, and the ball movement and spacing was perfect. Joe Harris was doing his thing. Credit to Steve Nash. He put Karis LeVert on the bench instead of Dinwiddie, which I honestly thought it was going to go the other way, and it's working out great. First game, but I think Karis LeVert, he got buckets off the bench, so that's going to be really good for them. And I just looked at their roster and I looked at the box score, and they have like 7 guys that they can realistically come off the bench for them. I mean, they're not going to place like a 12-man rotation in the playoffs, obviously, but they have like 7 guys that I would trust to come off the bench. Maybe not in the playoffs, but like in the regular season, they're going to have so much depth. And I think Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are going to be fine because they can honestly rest a bit depending on how great they, perform this season. But this team is so scary. So yeah, I'm fully sold on the Nets. They showed me everything I needed to see. I don't really care that it's just one game because they're going to only get even better from here, in my opinion. For the Warriors, I'm not going to jump the gun just because there was no Draymond Green, and he's the second best player on this team. Wiggins and Oubre aren't usually that bad. I mean,
we can have the Wiggins discussion in a bit, but
they were horrendous yesterday. And it's not crazy to say that this team is going to end up being a fringe playoff team. I had him as the 6th seed coming into this year, and that's, it's still realistic. But if it continues, honestly, if it continues, I think we've undervalued a little bit of Klay's importance to this team just because, Steph Curry, it was a little rough. He had 10 assists yesterday. He honestly could have had 20 if
Wiggins and
actually
Oubre
make shots.
Yeah.
Like Wiggins and Oubre could actually make shots. He probably would have had 20 assists yesterday. It was ridiculous. Like there's no depth on this team at all. Like when they were playing their bench unit, I was like, okay, who are some of these guys? I had to go pull up the stats, and I'm like, I don't even know who. Like
Toscano Anderson.
I have never heard of that dude in my life. I was like, who is
like
this
the
guy?
Warriors?
Never heard of him.
The Warriors' 15th man used to be like a Maurice Bates.
Yeah,
ridiculous. No, I'm joking. He used to be about like their 10th man, and most teams in that time frame that would be like the 6th or 7th man.
Yeah,
that's how good their bench used to be.
Yeah, so I'm not going to jump the gun on Steph. And look, when it comes to the narratives that some people are creating after like one game with Steph Curry, sure the memes are kind of funny, but like it's Steph Curry, he's going to be fine. Sure, he's going to have to adjust a little bit because it's been a little bit since he hasn't been on like a team that's had. He didn't have an all-star teammate yesterday, but I'm not worried at all when it comes to long-term for Steph. And I still think this team is going to be in the playoff race. Absolutely, it's just one game, and I expect Oubre to be better. And I hope Wiggins will be decent this year because that was just awful.
Christian,
yeah. To me, I think we need to kind of pump the brakes on the Warriors just because people are more concerned than they should be. I think Wiggins, at one point, I think he was shooting 1 for 8 last night. It wasn't good. And I think some of the looks were pretty good. So he just was missing open shots. Draymond Green's presence will definitely improve them. There's no question about that. My concern for them is defensively. I just don't know if they have enough guys to stop some of these high-powered offenses because the Nets are definitely one of the top 3 or 4 offensive teams in the league for sure. They're going to run quick. They got a really pretty young team. So that's not much. That's the concern for me for the Warriors. I think they'll still be right around the 6, 7, 8 seed. That doesn't really – I'm not really concerned on them missing the playoffs, but they just have to figure out some things. Oubre will play better, in my opinion, but Wiggins is the X factor because if he shoots like he did last night, it's just going to be problems offensively because there's going to be so much attention on Steph Curry, and then he's basically going to just hope that some other guys can hit shots. For the Nets, I think that Kevin Durant probably will sit some games out just because they need to make sure he doesn't get hurt again, which for any NBA fan, we don't want to see him because it's awesome when we get to see Durant versus Curry. Both of those guys weren't in the league most of the season last year. But yeah, it's their East to lose, in my opinion. I think they might not necessarily finish first just because KD probably will sit 8 to 10 games, but it's their conference to win, to lose. I think they have so much. You look at Karis LeVert. I actually liked Karis LeVert off the bench. I think you could have argued Spencer Dinwiddie running the second unit, but it looked like Karis LeVert was perfectly fine in that system. I think he scored 20 points. But yeah, like you mentioned before, they have like 7 or 8 guys that could come off the bench. You have guys like Bruce Brown, who was acquired in the offseason, and we thought nice pickup, like very good two-way player who can be really good defensively. Came in when they were up by like 25. And that's fine, I think, because that shows that they're really deep. And when they have to sit some guys, they might still be able to win games when Kevin Durant's strictly hurt because of that depth. So I think the East is the Nets to lose, but the Warriors should be fine. It's not too big of a concern for me.
I've got an article in the works about my biggest takeaways from the opening night. I've really got one for each team. With the Nets, it's like they can score. They can score. They've got so many different guys that can put the ball in the basket. My question for them is, can they defend reliably? Because historically speaking, you need at least a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense to win a championship.
Top 5, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's at the very least here. And, looking at the Nets and looking at some of their defensive personnel, you've got Kyrie, Dinwiddie, LeVert, DeAndre Jordan at this point in his career. Like, none of those guys scream, great defensive players or even really good defensive players at this point in time. But they've got a couple of switchable defenders with Durant and LeVert. I think they've got a good rim protector in Allen. Don't know why DeAndre Jordan is starting. I think that's a crime to humanity, to be quite frank. And so if they can defend, because they're going to score, they might be the best offense in the league. But can they consistently defend? Are they going to be able to, when Giannis comes around, are they going to be able to slow him down? That's where my questions are for them. And for the Warriors, like me and Pranav were talking about this last night, like the roster construction is bad. Like it's like Steph Curry's impact is so great because his offensive gravity is so large and guys just get so open. And we saw that last night. We saw Wiggins and Oubre getting open shots. The problem is
you just can't make them
bricked.
Yeah, you can't. Open shots mean nothing if they don't go in. And Oubre and Wiggins. Now, granted, it wasn't like.
Sorry to interrupt you, Thomas. Breaking news: James Harden has been fined a massive $50,000 for violating the league's health and safety protocol.
Pranav, I thought you were about to say James Harden got traded. And
I was like,
we got some Pranav nuke on the show.
Yeah, he deserves that. But the roster could Wiggins and Oubre. Now they were particularly bad last night. I can't envision they're going to be as bad as they were last night. But the fact of the matter is that they don't have guys that can consistently knock down threes, and that's going to be an issue. And someone like James Wiseman, it's like. He's not great on defense yet. Like he's in the pick and roll, like he's getting toasted. He's chasing the blocks way too often. And everyone was like, oh, Wiseman was terrific. But,
garbage time stats.
Yeah, literally. Now, granted, he hit some nice jumpers. But again, am I counting on Wiseman to reliably hit perimeter shots? At this point in his career, not a chance. And if you are, I mean, I don't really know what to tell you. So, the Warriors, it's just like I saw them personally as a playoff lock before this game. Like that was my personal opinion. You have Steph Curry and you have talented guys around him. You don't miss the playoffs. But now I'm not so sure. I still think they're a playoff team. I'm still sticking with them as my 6th seed, just like Will. But I'm a little more skeptical now. I'm a little more skeptical with them.
So let's start off with the Warriors. I had them like the highest rated team out of any of us, and quite frankly, I overrated them. I thought the impact Steph can overcome some of their offensive problems. But if you have Wiggins and Oubre bricking wide open shots that Steph creates for you, that's just not going to cut it. Klay Thompson probably hits those shots, which Andrew Wiggins had last night 9 out of 10 times. That's the reliability you had with a shooter like that. You don't have that anymore. You don't have that safety net. So I think with the Warriors, their offense is not going to be what I expected them to be. They have a solid defense, actually. Their defense is better than their offense, but with the Warriors, that's an issue because their offense has always been the driving force of their success, and it still has to be because they have the best offensive player in history in Steph, and you run that motion offense. Now you have to go away from that, and that kind of takes away the identity of the team. You have to go with something unfamiliar, and I just don't think that's going to be sustainable in the long run. In terms of James Wiseman, the impact of Draymond Green was felt. The impact of Draymond Green was felt in the sense that Wiseman will be a good player. Wiseman will be a good player for Golden State, but he's not going to be Draymond. Draymond was a switchable defender. He would have cleared a lot of the problems that Wiseman dealt with last night pretty easily, switching on to DeAndre Jordan, Kevin Durant. Wiseman's finishing on the offensive end was also highly suspect. He couldn't really finish his dunks, his putbacks. He got a couple garbage time shots, which padded up his stats. Went the Hoop Central tweeted bright future, and like 2 minutes ago I tweeted people are going to think Wiseman played good, even though he really didn't. And then you see that. So in terms of the Golden State Warriors, I think the over-exaggeration is kind of granted in a sense, but I think they'll still be a playoff team in the West. I just don't see them not being a playoff team. However, let me get my words back. But however, I wouldn't be surprised if they miss the playoffs. We all expected LeBron James in his first year with the Los Angeles Lakers to make the playoffs. And granted, if he stayed healthy, they would have. But we all expected him to make the playoffs in his first year with the Lakers just because it's LeBron James. But he didn't. And we could see the same thing happening with Steph Curry in this young team. So the Warriors are a project right now. So we'll see how that continues. In terms of the Nets, like you guys have all attested to, they can flat out score. They can just flat out score. Kyrie, KD, they were sensational last night. KD especially. I mean, Kyrie was better last night, but KD, especially coming off an Achilles injury, he looks the same. Like, I didn't see, like, if you guys were watching the game, nothing looked different to me.
Nothing different.
Nope. Like, he looked, maybe you could argue he was like 0.4 milliseconds less quick. I do not care. He looked the exact same. His shot looked the exact same. He was drilling shots. He drilled a shot right in James Wiseman's face. The welcome to the league moment. He just looked sensational. Kyrie as well. They didn't even have to play most of the second half because that's how much the Nets were just absolutely blowing out the Warriors. So the Nets are going to be a good team. In terms of winning the Eastern Conference, like Twitter has already dubbed, I'm not so sold on that yet because who's going to stop Giannis on that team? That's my only question. I need to see that matchup first before I could fully put a bet on the Nets.
And one more thing about the Warriors, like, yeah, they lost by 26. They were bad. But it was also one of those things where it's like their entire team played bad. Like, Eric Pascal was 2 for 6. Wiggins was 4 for 16. Curry was 7 for 21. Oubre was 3 for 14. Wiseman was like 3 for 8 before he started getting these garbage points. Wanamaker was 0 for 2. Poole was 1 for 4. Marquise Chris was 4 for 10. Like, the entire team from top to bottom was just awful. Yeah. And I don't think that – I still think they're a good team, obviously, but I don't think they're this bad. Like I don't – like, they shot like 33%. I don't have the math at the top of my head, but it was not good. It was not good whatsoever. And I think they're much better than how they played last night. So I feel like we kind of have to see more games from them because looking at last night's game is just unrealistic because they played, quite frankly, unrealistically bad.
Yeah, I agree. And then one last thing is, while I expect Wiggins and Oubre to play better, I don't know. Like the team's Achilles heel isn't going to be anything with Steph Curry or Draymond Green. I mean, it probably could be Wiggins, or even having a rookie in James Wiseman. It's going to be the fact that like after their top 6 guys, like who can you really rely on? Like Kai Bowman, like Brad Wanamaker? No, just like no one. There's like no one there.
So
yeah, it's not a good bench.
Thomas, you mentioned like the raw field goal like percentage of the Curry shooting 7 for 21.
Right.
Chris, okay, so last year the like true shooting percentage average in the NBA was 56.5.
Yeah.
Warriors shot 45.4% true shooting as a collective team. That's absolutely awful. That factors in free throws, 3-point shots. That adjusts the curve and kind of helps someone's efficiency get better.
Right.
Score. It like factors in other ways you could score than just raw field goal percentage. And they were that bad. That just can't happen. You can't win like that. You'll lose every time.
I mean, true shooting like elevates the percentage because of like it counts threes more than twos.
Yeah.
The problem is they didn't make any threes.
Yeah.
There was no elevation.
And my big issue with Golden State, like I already said, the roster construction was bad, but floor spacing. They don't have reliable floor spacers outside of Curry in their starting lineup. Let's see. Wiggins is below average. Oubre was average last season, and I believe that was the best shooting season to date. Draymond Green hasn't been a good shooter since like 2016, and Wiseman, I don't care that he hit a bunch of perimeter jump shots last night while he was playing against the Nets.
We need to see more.
Yeah, we absolutely need to see more. His shot selection is still bad. He took a one-legged Dirk fadeaway. Like, I can't buy the Warriors completely until I see them knocking down perimeter shots because that could be their biggest issue this season.
The whole team looked like Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
But we're going to move forward to our second game from opening night, Clippers-Lakers. Paul George, my guy Paul George dropped a nice 33 points on the Lakers' head on ring night. So I want to know what you guys take away. Well, I'm going to start off with this one. What do you guys take away from the Clippers opening night win? For me, absolutely nothing. I don't care. I do not care. You know why? We saw this last season. Clippers won opening night. They won Christmas Day. They hung their banners in their practice facility. Opening night champs. Christmas Day champs. Obviously, I'm joking. But we know that the Clippers rise up to play the Lakers in the regular season until we see it in the playoffs, which they didn't even get to a matchup last season because they took the Nuggets too lightly. Until we get to the playoffs and see a matchup between those two, I can't take them seriously. I mean, it's a regular season game, opening night. We've seen the same story play out. Who cares? Paul George, congratulations. We know what you could do in the regular season. No one's doubting your skills and abilities when it comes to regular season basketball. You're one of the best regular season players in the NBA. But come playoff time, we need to see that same Paul George. The same Paul George who dropped 33 points on 13 of 18 shooting last night. If he did that in Game 7, Clippers win. If he did that in any one of those games, Clippers win. And they could have very well won a championship last year if Paul George showed up like that. So if we need to see that in the playoffs from Paul George rather than just an opening night regular season game and then post game saying, "Oh, my shoulders feel healthy for the first time in 3 years." I mean, no, we need to see it in the playoffs.
I do think the Clippers are going to be better this season, and not because they won some opening night game. It's because, well, one thing, they addressed one of their biggest, in my opinion, one of their biggest needs last season was rim protection. What they go out and do, they signed Serge Ibaka, he's not the rim protector that he was with the Oklahoma City Thunder, but he's still one of the better rim protectors in the game. He's an elite floor spacer. They retained a lot of their depth pieces. They got Luke Kennard, a guy I really like. They maintain a lot of their depth. I think that they should move on from Lou Williams because, to be quite frank, I don't think he's that great. I mean, he provides inefficient scoring, and come playoff time, that inefficient scoring only becomes more inefficient. Doesn't play defense. I think
him and Harrell are both liabilities. I think they're both very overrated.
I agree, and I was just about to speak on Harrell. Like, I think losing Harrell may be a blessing in disguise. Like maybe, and now you have the Lakers, who guy that they're probably going to come into this postseason saying, all right, we got a bunch of guys we can play. Harrell's going to be included in that. But then it's like, when you have a 6'8" big man who can't space the floor, can't protect the rim, it's like, how much value do you really hold in the playoffs? Like, in the regular season, yeah, he can be the sixth man of the year, undeservedly, but still. But come playoff time, like, that skill set just, it doesn't translate. They've got a lot of depth. They've got two legitimate stars in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. They've got rim protection. I would have loved to see them go out and address their other big need, getting a playmaker, someone like a Ricky Rubio type even. Doesn't need to be a star, but just getting a playmaker. Even Nick Batum. Like, Nick Batum was a guy that in Charlotte was just, one of the most overpaid players in the league, got cut, just hit rock bottom after rock bottom. Now all of a sudden he's starting for the Clippers, and he made a decent impact. So I definitely think this Clippers team is built for more success than they were than last year. I wouldn't go as far as to say they're making the championship, but I definitely think we're going to look back at this year's Clippers and say they were definitely better than the year before.
And before Christian goes on, I'm newly minted Lakers fans, including our CEO Malik Wright, all trolled me on Twitter when I said the Lakers actually got worse by adding Montrezl Harrell and losing Dwight Howard. And they're like, well, Harrell, sixth man of the year. I mean, it's Dwight Howard. He doesn't have that much value. I'm like, okay, let's see what the Lakers do. They signed Gasol. You're like, oh, you look stupid now. We got Gasol. And then I'm like, okay. And Gasol, like, I watched him last night. He looks so much bigger. He looks so much slower. He's barely playable. I mean, that's not an upgrade to me. And then Harrell had this great block. He had a great block shot. The next possession, he gets completely blown by Ivica Zubac. It's those things with Harrell. You can't trust him. He's a liability, and that's why I don't really see the value in that signing for the Lakers at all.
I liked it because, one, they didn't spend a lot of money, and
he took the clutch discount.
It's like a mid-level exception.
Right, and also, like, Dwight Howard wasn't that. like Dwight Howard wasn't the guy they were giving big minutes either necessarily. And the difference
I agree, and they lost JaVale too.
Yeah, and the difference between Howard and Gasol is that, well, Howard is probably more impactful, more athletic at this point, but Gasol can at least stretch the floor. Like that's one thing that you are going to get from Gasol. That maybe you can play him in some scenarios, but it just seems like, you know, guys like Dwight, guys like a JaVale were just like, there were some points where they were just kind of unplayable, especially when you were running lineups with Davis at the 4.
You're right. But the same could be said about Montrez. He's unplayable in the playoffs.
Oh, sure.
Especially on defense.
Oh, yeah. I 100% agree. I'm just saying, for the price, like, it's like one of those things where it's like, sure, I'll take it. I mean, like, they'll realize soon that they can't play him, you know, a bunch of minutes in the playoffs. Just for his price, for his regular season production, maybe he'll get a couple buckets in the playoffs.
Hey, AD, slide to the 5. Everything will be better.
I've always said that. I think Anthony Davis is a center, but just
him and Giannis are centers who don't know they're centers.
Yeah, exactly.
They just don't want to play center.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I love what you said, Thomas. I think the Clippers needed to restructure their rotation. It just, to me, if you bring back Montrez, you bring back everybody. They didn't really use Luke Shamet, which I think that was kind of confusing to me in the playoffs, but they traded him. They got Luke Kennard, who I like as well. But yeah, I think it was important to get guys like Serge Ibaka. I think that just gives him another way to kind of play and give Ty Lue a different dimension, because honestly, last year, I don't think that team was as good enough as it is now. I think they're improved. Serge Ibaka's a guy that they needed, in my opinion. They didn't address the playmaker position. I like you mentioned Ricky Rubio. I think that's a guy that could have been helpful. When you have guys like Pat Bev and Reggie Jackson, that doesn't provide you much playmaking ability. But you have Nick Batum, who was utilized somewhat as a point guard last night, which is okay. I think he will offer something as well. But for me, the Lakers, nothing bothers me about last night. I think they were going to come out slow. They don't really worry about the regular season. They still could finish first in the West. That wouldn't surprise me, but it doesn't really bother me that they just came out slow. The Clippers almost let them win the game, which they should never have, because I think they were up by 20 in the first quarter, and it was evaporated within a couple of minutes. So I like the Lakers kind of, in a sense, that Dennis Schroeder improves. He's a solid player. I don't think Montrez is a great addition, but he's not a bad addition. And same thing with Marc Gasol. We don't know what we're going to get from him. He's pretty old now. And you mentioned he looked a lot slower. His impact really wasn't. He was limited last night. So it's interesting. I think the Clippers will be one of the contenders to the Lakers. They'll be a threat, but we'll see what happens in the postseason, I guess, then.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my biggest takeaway I didn't really have any takeaways on the Lakers side. Like we've seen this with LeBron, especially LeBron-Laker teams and Anthony Davis. We saw they lost the opening night last year, and they were the 1 seed all season. They lost the first game to the Blazers, and they won 4 straight. They lost the first game to the Rockets, and they won 4 straight. It's like LeBron, honestly, he posted on Instagram like 10 minutes after the game or something. Like maybe he was
he's like, I got a really big team.
Right. He was more focused on the fact that there was rings. And honestly, you could kind of tell, because like there was like a couple quarters of the game and then they were down by like 7 with like 6 minutes remaining, and he didn't even come back into the game. And I was like, all right, LeBron just does not care about this game. And the Clippers,
the game was like 7 points with like 4 minutes left, and Bron.
Yeah, and he didn't even come back into the game. I was like, all right, yeah, LeBron doesn't care. And it was still kind of a close game, which just says that when the Lakers take this seriously, they should be able to beat the Clippers in the playoffs. I mean, sure, it'll be competitive. I don't think they'll sweep them, but I don't think it's going to be a 7-game series at all. But so I don't really have any takeaways on the Lakers side. For the Clippers, I do have a couple. I mean, I think I kind of agree with you guys that they're going to I think in terms of championship contention, I think they'll have a better chance this year than they did last year. Other teams are better, and I could honestly see if they faced up against the Mavericks, I could see the Mavericks beating them. But I still think that they're going to take the regular season a lot more serious, because last year they did not take the regular season serious at all. So they're going to actually try and establish roles on this team and build chemistry throughout the regular season, and hopefully they'll be healthy. And I think that'll be good for them long term. I think they're going to get over what happened to them last year with a 3-1 lead. And I honestly think Tyronn Lue is a better coaching situation for this. I'm not going to say he's a better coach than Doc Rivers, but I honestly think he's a better coach for this specific team. And he obviously he implemented. He had this interview, I believe, before the season where he said he was going to try and implement some triangle offense schemes.
Yeah, Kawhi recommended, or I think he requested it.
Yeah, they're trying to form a triangle around Kawhi. Yeah.
Right, yeah. We saw a little bit of that. It was just a little hint of that. It was kind of came in the first quarter, and they were played excellent in the first quarter. So I actually think that could lessen the importance of having a floor general, which is obviously what they need, a primary ball handler, a playmaker. If they implement a triangle kind of style offense, that would lessen the importance of having a guy like that. Not that that really makes impact in the fact that it vaults them up into the championship favorite above the Lakers, but it could help them out. And look, the Clippers, despite all the memes and the fact that they blew a 3-1 lead, they're still an extremely dangerous team. Especially if Paul George is playing like this, but it's always an if with Paul George. It's never, you really can't expect him to play consistently very well in the playoffs because he's always just been the thing is with Paul George is he's had games where he's been great in the playoffs, and the very next game he'll be trash. And except for this last season, he was even worse than he normally is. So we can't really trust him. Hopefully, I hope every time Paul George plays well, I hope. I'm like, all right, Paul George, let's see this, again, consistently in the playoffs. So I want him to do it, but it just never happens. But in the reality is,
to be fair to Paul George, and as you guys know, I'm not a big fan of the guy, but Paul George was fine in the 2018 playoffs. I think he gets too much hate for that.
Was that the one where they lost to the Jazz?
No, to the Blazers.
Oh.
Yeah.
He wasn't too bad.
Yeah, again, it's really just the inconsistencies. He's had games where he's been great.
The Mavs series where he dropped 35.
Where he's just been so bad. And it's just it alternates with him. And then this past season, he had an entire series where he was awful.
Mm-hmm. But we have one more segment in the show tonight, and not just predicting winners. Winners for tonight's headline matchup. And I know Thomas attested to this on Twitter today. So, guys, I want to know what you guys are expecting to see out of the Suns matchup with the Mavericks tonight. Luka Doncic versus Devin Booker. All of us are going to be tuned into high prolific scorers. What do you think is going to happen? Who do you guys have winning? What are you guys going to see from this game? What crazy takes do you have from this game? I'm going to start with Christian on this one.
So I think without Porzingis, who is close to returning, I think he is expected to miss Christmas Day against the Lakers. But he'll be back soon. I think the Suns will win at home. It's going to be a very good game. I think Luka Doncic will still he honestly could put up a triple-double tonight. It wouldn't surprise me. But when you bring Chris Paul in, we saw last year, I think a lot of people thought the Thunder were not making the playoffs this year. A lot of people thought they were going to be the worst team in the Western Conference, and he surprised us all. So I am not taking anything lightly from them anymore. I will take the Suns seriously. And Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton's going to improve with a playmaker like Chris Paul. So I think that on their home floor, Chris Paul and all of them are going to be very good. They don't concern me in the sense that they won't miss the playoffs. I think they're going to make the playoffs. They're one of the locks, like Will mentioned before. There's probably 6, and I think they are one of those. But the Dallas Mavericks, they don't concern me. I mentioned in an article today that they probably won't be as good in the regular season, maybe if Porzingis misses a little more time than we thought. But they are definitely dangerous, and with Luka Doncic and Porzingis, and they improved their defense. Josh Richardson was a nice guy to bring in from the 76ers. You have Willie Cauley-Stein, who's a nice interior presence. You have a couple other guys that missed the bubble, Jalen Brunson and I forget the other guy I was going to mention. But they improved while they lost Seth Curry, which I think was the only major loss, I guess, in that sense. But tonight, I think the Suns will come out and win tonight, and we'll see what happens. But, yeah.
As Pranav said, I did make some bold takes on Twitter today. One of them was Christian's Knicks beating the Pacers. Nice. That was one of my bold takes. But the other one was that I think tonight's game is going to be one for the ages. I think it's going to be a double overtime thriller where we're going to see Luka Doncic and Devin Booker both drop over 40 points. That is my prediction. It is going to be a big game. Look, I'm expecting big things. The reason I'm so high on the Mavericks is because I'm so high on Luka Doncic this year. Obviously, he's my MVP pick. I just think he's going to have an all-time regular season. And I think that early on, while yes, Porzingis is a big loss, and you can't really overlook that, I think that Luka is going to be so good to the point that we're going to look back and be like, wow, he carried such a heavy load while Porzingis was out, and I think they're going to be really good still, even when he's out, and when he comes back, they're just going to be even. They're just going to be even better. And as for the Suns, I mean, they're a great team. What else to say? I mean, they already had a solid nucleus in place, and then you add Chris Paul, a top 15 player in the league at the moment. That's a recipe for success. I think Chris Paul and Devin Booker are a perfect fit. They've got Ayton, a big man I love, some really solid wings. I like both of these teams, and I think tonight's game, we're going to see the good and the bad from both of these teams. But at the end of the day, they will be the two best players on the court tonight, Devin Booker and Luka Doncic. I think that those two are going to go off. It's going to be a fun night. I really think that game is going to be one of the best games of the season.
But who do you have winning though? Who do you have winning that matchup?
Ooh, who do I have winning? I'll go Dallas. I'm not betting against Luka in clutch time.
So I rolled the dice earlier this season. I factored in that Kristaps Porzingis is going to be injured. I didn't care. I still thought that not only is Luka Doncic going to win MVP, but Rick Carlisle is also going to win Coach of the Year. And I think that's going to be predicated on how successful they are without Porzingis. And I think they're going to be really successful. This offense, even without Porzingis, was still the best in the NBA. They didn't have that much of a drop-off without Porzingis, and that's just how lethal they are in every offensive possession. They got Josh Richardson. I'm not really sure how that's going to fit because Seth Curry was one of their better offensive players. They got Josh Richardson, and they might have just downgraded on offense to get a slight upgrade on defense. So I'm not sure how that's going to work. But if Thomas's guy, Tyrell Terry, lives up to the draft hype, then that replacement fits in perfectly. It fits in perfectly for them. So I expect Dallas to win this game. I expect Luka Doncic to have a 40-point triple-double. I know that's high expectations, but I'm going to roll the dice on that one. I really think he is. I think he's going to show out tonight on primetime TV, and he's going to show why he should be the league MVP this season. He's going to start off strong. So I have Luka Doncic and the Mavs winning this game narrowly in an overtime thriller. So yeah, I have Luka and the Mavs winning this game. Booker is going to be great. Paul is going to be great. I'm especially looking forward to see DeAndre Ayton with CP. But yeah, that's my take for tonight.
Before Will or Christian goes, in not so breaking news, Russell Westbrook has started off his Wizards career 3 for 11.
Oh, stop.
Russell Westbrook happened. 0 for 1 from 3. Just it's good to know.
At least he took 1-3.
Barrett,
are we winning the game?
My apologies. RJ Barrett has started 4 for 4 to start the game. So if he keeps proving me wrong, he was hot in the preseason.
Thomas,
by the way. Ever since I tweeted it's a new season and RJ Barrett still isn't good at basketball, he's shot over 70% from the field.
He took that personally. He took that
seriously. I think he was on Twitter on the bench during the preseason, looking through his feed. But anyways, Will, what are you expecting to see from this Suns matchup tonight, and who do you have in this game?
Yeah, I'm expecting a super close game, but I am going to agree with Christian. I'm picking the Suns over the Mavs for this game. And I think the Mavs are a better team. I think they'll have a better record. But it's really just the Porzingis factor. And I still think don't get me wrong, Luka, I think he's my MVP pick too. And Rick Carlisle could have a good argument especially if they're like still a top 4 team in the West without having Porzingis for a portion of the year. I mean, sheesh. But it's just for this one game, I will pick the Phoenix Suns. And it's really just because I think their roster, Mavericks missing their second best player combined with the fact that the Suns just have a really, really good team. I think Chris Paul is going to he's been working with Devin Booker really like the day after he got traded to them. So I don't see any really like rust in terms of not going to have to like adjust their play styles. Their play styles already match. So there's no adjustment there. Like Chris Paul had to do a little bit with James Harden and stuff.
They're great off the ball.
Right, exactly. They're not going to have any struggles at all. I'm expecting Devin Booker to go off, and I'm expecting Luka to probably go off too. But I think the fact that there's 2 stars there versus 1 will give the Suns the edge in a very close game. But I still think the Mavericks. I mean, I have them in my top 5 NBA teams, so I'm still high on the Mavericks, obviously.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game, guys. I'm really looking forward to tonight. This should honestly been a Christmas Day matchup. I would actually much rather see this than a game like Sixers. I'm not sure if the Sixers Celtics is a game for Christmas Day. So in Celtics Nets, but I think this is a better matchup, honestly, than the Mavs Lakers because these teams are just so much closer. I think people are overselling this Luka versus LeBron thing. I think this matchup should have been the Christmas Day matchup. But that's going to do it for today's show. Hope you guys enjoy your Christmas. Hope you guys enjoy watching hoops. We'll catch you next week. Peace.
Is this the time?